The false dawn, the Zorvak Confederation's capital ship Supremacy, drifted through the debris field that had once been humanity's last stand. Admiral Korthak stood at the viewing deck, his four arms clasped behind his elongated frame as he surveyed the destruction. The blue-white fragments of human vessels sparkled like dying stars against the void. After 6 brutal months of warfare, the upstart species that called themselves humans had finally been crushed. "Admiral, the final tallies have arrived," announced Sub-Commander Veth, approaching with a datapad. The insectoid officer's compound eyes reflected the celebration lights that had been activated throughout the ship. All 17 human colony worlds have been pacified. Their homeworld, Earth, surrendered unconditionally 3 cycles ago. The species has been properly subjugated. Korthax's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. The humans had proven more troublesome than anticipated. Unlike the Etherians who had surrendered at first contact, or the silicon-based quartzites who had negotiated their submission, humanity had fought with unexpected ferocity. They had destroyed 3 Zorvak dreadnoughts before the end, an impressive feat for such a young spacefaring race. But impressive or not, the result was inevitable. The Confederation commanded over 10,000 vessels and controlled half the galaxy. What could one small species do against such might? "Send word to all member species," Korthax commanded, his voice resonating through the bridge. "The human threat has been eliminated. Peace has been restored to our sectors. Let this be a lesson to any who would challenge Zorvak authority." The message spread quickly through subspace channels, reaching every corner of Confederation space. On 100 worlds, subordinate species received the news with mixture of relief and resignation. The humans had inspired some with their defiance, showing that the Zorvak could be hurt, could be made to bleed. But in the end, the Confederation's superiority had been proven once again. Meanwhile, in the ruins of New Haven Colony, Commander Sarah Chen crawled through twisted metal and shattered dreams. Her naval uniform was torn and blood-stained, her left arm hanging uselessly at her side. Behind her, 43 survivors followed in grim silence, all that remained of a colony that had housed 2 million souls. The Zorvak bombardment had been thorough, methodical. They had targeted hospitals first, then schools, then residential districts. The message was clear. Resistance meant annihilation. "Commander, the emergency shuttle is still intact," whispered Lieutenant Torres, his voice hoarse from smoke inhalation. "But the Zorvak patrols—" Chen raised her good hand for silence. She could hear the distinctive whine of Zorvak atmospheric fighters in the distance. They were hunting survivors, making sure no human military personnel escaped to potentially organize resistance. But Chen had something they didn't know about: old mining tunnels that ran beneath the colony, predating the official settlement. Her grandfather had helped dig them 70 years ago. The Zorvak's surface scans wouldn't penetrate the lead-lined rock. They moved through the tunnels for 6 hours, navigating by emergency chemical lights. Children whimpered softly, quickly hushed by their parents. Everyone understood that sound meant death. When they finally emerged near the abandoned mining depot, Chen's heart nearly stopped. The shuttle was there, just as Torres had said, but so was something else, a message carved into the hull in laser script. "The void remembers. The shadow endures. Protocol 7 active." Chen's blood ran cold. Protocol 7 was a myth, a legend whispered among Earth's military elite. It supposedly referred to a contingency plan so classified that even fleet admirals didn't have full clearance. If it was real, if it had been activated, she shook her head. Now wasn't the time for false hope. They needed to escape first. The shuttle launched without incident, the Zorvak patrols having moved on to other sectors. As they broke atmosphere, Chen took one last look at New Haven, burning below. The once green world was now scarred with massive craters, its oceans boiling, where antimatter bombs had struck. This was the fate of those who resisted the Confederation. But as their shuttle reached the system's edge, Chen's communications array picked up something unusual, a tight beam transmission from the direction of Neptune's orbit in Sol system. It lasted only microseconds, but the pattern was unmistakably human in origin. More disturbing still, According to the timestamp, it had been sent 3 days after Earth's surrender, after all human military assets had supposedly been destroyed or captured. Back aboard the Supremacy, Admiral Korthax was reviewing plans for the integration of human survivors into the Confederation's labor force when the first report came in. A mining station in the Kepler system had gone dark. No distress signal, no signs of attack, just sudden, complete communication blackout. Korthax dismissed it as equipment failure. The station was old, built by the Etherians before their conquest. Such failures were not uncommon. Then came the second report. A Zorvac supply convoy had disappeared in hyperspace between Proxima and Wolf 359. All 6 vessels, gone without a trace. The hyperspace route was well-traveled, well-mapped. There should have been debris, some sign of what had happened. There was nothing. By the third incident, an entire orbital defense platform suddenly losing power over the quartzite homeworld, Korthax could no longer ignore the pattern. He called an emergency meeting of his senior staff. "These are not random failures," insisted Intelligence Officer Drock, his scaled skin shifting colors with agitation. "The timing is too convenient, the target's too strategic. Someone is conducting coordinated sabotage." "The humans?" suggested Veth. "Perhaps some military remnants we failed to account for?" Korthax's primary eyes narrowed. They had been thorough in their victory. Every human ship had been tracked and destroyed or captured. Every military installation had been obliterated. The species' industrial capacity had been completely dismantled. "Impossible. We destroyed their entire fleet. Their shipyards are radioactive craters. What few survivors remain are scattered and powerless." But even as he spoke the words, doubt crept into his mind. The humans had surprised them before. Their tactics had been unconventional, their determination unexpected. What if they had hidden something? What if the victory had been too easy? The thought was interrupted by an urgent transmission from Sector Command. The massive sensor array at Terminus Point, one of the Confederation's most powerful deep space scanning stations, had detected something. Multiple contacts appearing and disappearing like ghosts at the edge of sensor range. The signatures were unlike anything in the Zorvac database, but the movement patterns were distinctly artificial. Someone was out there watching, waiting. In the cold depths of Neptune's shadow, something stirred in the darkness. A massive structure, hidden beneath layers of sensor-deflecting metamaterials and gravity distortion fields, began its awakening sequence. Deep within its core, thousands of cryogenic pods started their warming cycles. Status lights that had been dark for months flickered to life. Admiral Marcus Stone opened his eyes for the first time in half a year. The neural implants in his brain immediately synchronized with the ship's systems, flooding his consciousness with data. Earth had fallen, just as the projections had indicated. The colonies were gone, as expected. Humanity's visible military presence had been eliminated exactly according to plan. The Zorvac had taken the bait perfectly. Around him, his crew was awakening. 5,000 of humanity's finest, selected not for their public service records but for their performance. In black operations, their ability to think unconventionally, their willingness to do whatever was necessary for species survival. They had volunteered for this knowing they would wake to a galaxy where everyone they knew was either dead or enslaved. "Status report," Stone commanded, his voice rough from months of silence. "All systems nominal, Admiral," responded Captain Lisa Reeves, his executive officer. "The Revenant is fully operational. Stealth systems are holding. The Zorvac haven't detected us." Stone nodded slowly. The Revenant was humanity's greatest secret. A warship built not in Earth's visible shipyards but in the hidden facilities carved into asteroids in the Oort cloud. It incorporated technology that officially didn't exist. Developments from Black, projects that even Earth's government hadn't known about, but it was more than just one ship. It was the flagship of something much larger. "Signal the rest of the fleet," Stone ordered. "Begin Phase 1. Across the outer solar system, similar structures began their activation sequences. Not a dozen ships, not 100, but nearly 1,000 vessels. each one a product of humanity's most classified military project. For 20 years, resources had been secretly diverted, personnel had disappeared into black sites, entire asteroids had been hollowed out and converted into shipyards. The project had been called different things by those few who knew of it. The Last Stand Protocol, the Phoenix Initiative, but its official designation was simple: Project Phantom. The Zorvak thought they had won. They had defeated the humanity that they could see, the forces that fought in the open. They hadn't realized that humans had learned long ago, through their own bloody history, that the best way to survive overwhelming force was to become something your enemy couldn't target: a shadow, a ghost, a phantom in the dark. As the hidden fleet powered up their weapon systems, as crews ran through combat preparations, as humanity's true military might prepare to reveal itself, Admiral Stone stood on the bridge of the Revenant and smiled coldly. The Zorvak had wanted war. They were about to discover what war with humanity really meant. The Shadow Fleet rises. The Zorvak patrol vessel Swift Strike was conducting a routine sweep of the outer Sol system when Lieutenant Krex noticed the anomaly. His sensor station, designed to detect the faintest energy signatures, registered something that shouldn't exist: a gravitational distortion with no visible source. "Commander, I'm reading something unusual at bearing 27 Mark IV, Krex reported, his tentacles dancing over the controls. "It appears to be a mass shadow, but there's nothing there." Commander Thos moved to examine the readings. The Zorvak had the most advanced sensors in known space, capable of detecting a ship's heat signature from half a system away. Yet here was clear evidence of something massive, less than 1,000 kilometers from their position, and they couldn't see it. "Could be a rogue asteroid with unusual mineral composition," Thos suggested, though his voice carried uncertainty. "Move us closer for a detailed scan." The Swift Strike adjusted course, its sensors probing the empty space ahead. For a moment, nothing changed. Then, like a predator dropping its camouflage, space itself seemed to ripple. Where there had been nothing. Suddenly there was something, a warship unlike anything in the Zorvak database. It was massive, easily dwarfing their patrol vessel, with hull lines that seemed to bend light around them. The ship was painted pure black, with only one marking visible: a small Earth emblem on its bow. Commander Thos had exactly 3 seconds to process what he was seeing before the Revenant's weapons spoke. Particle beams lanced out, cutting through the Swift Strike's shields as if they were tissue paper. The patrol vessel's distress signal managed only a partial transmission before the ship was reduced to expanding plasma. On the bridge of the Supremacy, Admiral Korthax received the fragmented distress call with disbelief. A human warship? Impossible. They had destroyed every human vessel, tracked down every hidden base. Where could such a ship have come from? "Admiral, we're receiving multiple reports," Veth announced, his compound eyes wide with alarm. 17 Zorvak installations have gone dark in the last 10 minutes. Border patrols are reporting contact with unknown vessels that appear and disappear from sensors. Korthax studied the tactical display as reports flooded in. Mining stations obliterated, supply convoys ambushed, communication relays destroyed. The attacks were coordinated, strategic, designed to blind and cripple the Zorvak presence in human space. But more disturbing than the attacks themselves was the method: ships appearing from nowhere, striking with weapons that bypassed shields, then vanishing without a trace. "How many vessels are we dealing with?" Korthax demanded. "Unknown, sir. They're using some kind of stealth technology we've never encountered. Our sensors can't maintain a lock." Meanwhile, aboard the Revenant, Admiral Stone studied the holographic display showing Zorvak force distributions across the sector. The enemy had grown complacent in their victory, spreading their forces thin to maintain control over conquered territories. They had made the classic mistake of every conqueror throughout history, assuming the war was over just because they had won the visible battles. "Phase 1 is complete," Captain Reeves reported. "We've eliminated their sensor networks and supply lines in this sector. The Zorvak are effectively blind. Begin Phase 2, Stone ordered. It's time to show them what they're really dealing with." The Shadow Fleet moved like wolves in the night, using their stealth systems to appear wherever the Zorvak were weakest. The technology was humanity's greatest achievement. A combination of metamaterials that absorbed sensor signals, gravity manipulators that bent space around the ships, and heat sinks that reduced their thermal signatures to background levels. The Zorvak's sensors designed to track conventional vessels were useless against them. But it wasn't just the stealth technology that made the human ships devastating. It was the weapons they carried, products of black projects that had been deemed too dangerous for conventional warfare. Quantum torpedoes that phased through shields, directed singularity projectors that created microscopic black holes, nanite swarms that could consume a ship from the inside out. Weapons that humanity's public government had banned. But that project, Phantom had secretly perfected. The Zorvak battle group at Sigma Draconis never saw the attack coming. 30 warships, including 2 dreadnoughts, simply ceased to exist. One moment they were maintaining their blockade of the conquered human colony. The next, they were expanding clouds of atoms as nanite swarms reduced them to their component elements. Sub-Commander Veth found Admiral Korthax in the Supremacy's Strategic Command Center, surrounded by holographic displays showing the deteriorating situation. In the past 6 hours, the Zorvak had lost more ships than in the entire war against humanity, and they still couldn't locate the enemy fleet. Admiral, the Confederation Council is demanding answers, Veth reported. They want to know how a supposedly defeated species is destroying our forces. Admiral, the Confederation Council is demanding answers, Veth reported. They want to know how a supposedly defeated species is destroying our forces. Korthax's mandibles clicked in frustration. He had no answers to give. Everything they thought they knew about humanity was wrong. The forces they had defeated had been a facade, a deliberate sacrifice to make the Zorvak believe they had won. The real human military had been hiding, waiting, preparing. Order all forces to converge on the Sol system, Korthax commanded. If we concentrate our ships, they can't pick us off. He was interrupted by alarms shrieking across the bridge. The tactical display showed new contacts appearing, not 1 or 2, but hundreds. The entire human shadow fleet was dropping its stealth, revealing itself at last. The sight was terrifying. These weren't the cobbled-together vessels the Zorvak had fought before. These were purpose-built warships designed from the ground up for a single purpose: the complete annihilation of enemy forces. Admiral Stone stood on the Revenant's bridge, watching as his fleet unveiled itself. Around him, his crew worked with the cold efficiency of professionals who had trained for this moment their entire careers. There was no celebration, no triumphant declarations. They all understood what this meant. Humanity could never go back to what it was. They had become something else now, something harder, darker, more dangerous. All ships, this is Admiral Stone, he broadcast to his fleet. You know what we've lost. You know what they took from us. Today we return the favor. Today, we show the galaxy that humanity doesn't just fight to survive, we fight to win. All vessels engage at will. The battle that followed would be studied by military historians for generations. The Zorvak, despite outnumbering the human fleet 3-1, were utterly outmatched. Their weapons couldn't lock onto ships that flickered in and out of visibility. Their shields couldn't stop weapons that existed partially in other dimensions. Their tactics, designed for conventional warfare, were useless against an enemy that had spent decades preparing for this specific fight. The Supremacy itself came under attack from 3 human destroyers that appeared from nowhere, their quantum torpedoes phasing through the dreadnought's shields to detonate inside its hull. Admiral Korthax watched in horror as entire sections of his ship were vented into space. The pride of the Zorvak fleet, the symbol of their dominance, was being torn apart like paper. "Admiral, we must retreat," Veth shouted over the chaos of exploding consoles and screaming alarms. But Korthax knew there was nowhere to run. The humans had planned this perfectly. They had cut off escape routes, destroyed communication nodes, isolated Zorvak forces from each other. This wasn't just an attack. It was an execution. In the end, it took less than 4 hours. The entire Zorvak presence in human space was eliminated. Not a single Confederation ship escaped to warn the rest of the galaxy. The Shadow Fleet had accomplished what seemed impossible. They had turned total defeat into absolute victory. But Admiral Stone knew this was just the beginning. The Zorvac Confederation controlled half the galaxy, commanded thousands more ships. Humanity had won this battle by using surprise and superior technology. But those advantages wouldn't last forever. The enemy would adapt, would learn, would return with overwhelming force. "Sir, we're receiving transmissions from the surviving human populations," Captain Reeves reported. They're asking if it's really us." Stone nodded slowly. "Open a channel to all human survivors." His image appeared on screens across the broken remnants of human civilization. On Earth, where survivors huddled in ruined cities, on colonies where enslaved populations labored under Zorvac oversight, on hidden bases where military remnants had continued hopeless resistance. "This is Admiral Marcus Stone of the Terran Shadow Fleet," he announced, his voice carrying the weight of humanity's darkest hour and brightest hope. "To our people who have endured occupation, who have suffered under alien rule, who believed all was lost, we bring a simple message. Humanity has not fallen. We have not surrendered. We have been waiting, preparing, growing stronger in the darkness." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. "To the Zorvac Confederation and all who would threaten human existence, we offer a different message. You believed victory was yours. You celebrated too soon. Peace was an illusion we allowed you to have while we prepared. That illusion is now shattered. The war you thought you won has just begun, and this time we're not fighting to survive. We're fighting to ensure that no species ever threatens humanity again." The transmission ended, but its impact rippled across the galaxy. The Zorvac Confederation, which had seemed invincible just days before, now faced a terrible truth. They had awakened something in humanity, something that had been sleeping in the species' genetic memory since their days as persistence hunters on the African plains. They had reminded humans what they truly were, not just survivors but predators who had clawed their way to the top of their world's food chain through intelligence, determination, and an absolute refusal to accept defeat. The Shadow Fleet began its next phase of operations, striking out from Sol System toward Zorvac core worlds. They moved like death itself, appearing from nowhere, striking without warning, disappearing before retaliation could come. The galaxy had celebrated humanity's defeat. Now it would learn why humans had become Earth's apex predator, not through strength or speed, but through their ability to plan, to adapt, and to turn certain defeat into inevitable victory. The war was far from over. The Zorvac still commanded vast resources, still controlled enormous territories. But something fundamental had changed. The hunters had become the hunted. The victors had become victims, and humanity, which the galaxy had written off as another conquered species, had revealed its true nature. A species that had survived ice ages, plagues, and world wars not by being stronger than their challenges, but by being more cunning, more determined, and infinitely more dangerous when cornered. As the Revenant jumped to hyperspace, leading the Shadow Fleet toward their next target, Admiral Stone allowed himself a cold smile. The Zorvac had wanted to teach humanity about power, about dominance, about the natural order of the galaxy. They were about to receive an education they would never forget, assuming any of them survived to remember it.